Nice. This meeting is being recorded, so welcome everyone to the June 2nd, 2021 edition of the Principals Committee weekly meeting from the GitOps Working Group. There's no reason to be this formal, but we are recording for people that listen in later, so please everyone act accordingly. I pasted in the link to the Google Doc for our meetings right to the header for today's meeting, so please pop on, any agenda items. We have two agenda items on there now. I may as well get started. So first one that I think most people in this meeting know already is that we have a public pre-release of the principles of the GitOps principles and the glossary. And so that's, everyone who worked on that through meetings and asynchronously in GitHub is thanked, both in the pull request and in Git co-authorship. So thank you, that was awesome. We know that it's pretty terse right now. And if I understand correctly, our goal for the principles is to keep them short, but precise, and for any of the notes to move to other supporting documents ultimately, whether that be the glossary, the best practices doc, or other supporting documents in the documents repo. But that's where we stand now. It's versioned, so we can, where it's at right now will always be there in version 0.1.0. So yay. Robert, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the fun part of collaborating through Git. But for those on the call who might not have been here in past meetings, what we've done sometimes if we want to do focused collaborative editing is we'll throw it inside a HackMD document and just do, essentially Google Docs style collaborative editing for Markdown. So just do like pretty focused real-time collaborative editing. We can always do that if we need to do that again. Okay, so that was really it for that announcement.
Just a quick comment around that announcement, Scott. Do you think, what do you all think about kind of like doing some blog posts or some other means of kind of like socializing this to the broader audience? Because I think right now, it's something that we are aware of, but still, like part of the whole working group and principles objective is to kind of like get everybody on the same page as to what GitOps is all about. So I think as the committee that's in charge of defining, like collaborating around these principles, we want to make sure that the world knows about it, right? So what do you all think are good action items that we could promote or run on ourselves to get this socialized to the broader community?
Post is a great idea. This is a project for the website committee that I'm working on, which is we need a blog so we can put that post somewhere. But absolutely, I think I posted the principles around a few different places and got a pretty tepid response. Oh, neat, interesting, okay. So having a blog post where we can introduce, like, this is why this is important. This is, these principles are based on 30 years of software deployment and best practices. Like, telling that story, I think, is a really good idea. I wouldn't mind taking a crack at it and then sharing with the group. And then as far as the website goes, I think we should be having it launched in the next 2 weeks. I think we'll have a draft relatively shortly here to share with everybody, and then make some quick iterations and launch it, and then iterate as we go. So we should be in good shape for that.
Cool. I'll also write, because I think that the more kind of exposure that we have, the better. So I'll also kind of give it a crack at having another version of a post that we can promote through other channels, so that kind of like there's also this sense of consensus, right? Like, this is something that now multiple members of organizations are agreeing to be kind of like the baseline of what GitOps is all about, right?
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, so for my part, just 2 cents too, is that I think that's probably the most important part. I'm guessing the reason that the response from some folks might be not highly enthusiastic is because they've read similar versions, what feel like similar versions to these principles over the last several years. You know, they've been out, and then and even when in the announcement for the GitOps working group, the principles as they were, I'll put my hand down. The principles as they were are still summarized on that README. So I think just at a glance, it might not look super different, but I think what a lot of the people might not realize is just how many voices there are in this symphony. You know, like
Right.
how many people have really high priorities for themselves, for their companies, the tools they represent, the open source projects they represent, the commercial interests that they have, and to make sure that the principles are something that everyone, like across the board, has broad consensus on. So yeah, like now that we have that, also it's very short, you know, and we have a lot of the content still in Git history. So I think that's part of the goal now of these weekly meetings, is to look back at some of this and draw from some of that Git history and from other things we might want to add, and really flesh it out a little bit more while keeping the principles themselves really short.
Yeah. And another thing that comes to mind real quick, and sorry to kind of like just blurt out things out of agenda, but it's just kind of like stuff that comes to mind. What about the CNCF? You know, being a CNCF working group, should the CNCF somehow communicate, promote, adopt? Like, what is the role of the CNCF, us being a working group below the CNCF, in terms of kind of like establishing these principles as something that they are effectively promoting and adopting, right? This is kind of like not just our position, but also the CNCF's adopted.
So that, oh, go ahead, Scott.
You can go, Dan.
Oh, the CNCF has a standing policy of not picking winners. So as far as promoting the adoption of the standard, they certainly won't do it as like a, here's our recommendation, but they are a marketing arm for any project underneath them. And so they should be willing to, once we have the blog post, we could do a blog post on the CNCF blog too. We could do a webinar on the CNCF webinar rotation. Like, so they
Right.
have a bunch of different arms that we can use to promote this stuff that we should take advantage of. But they won't, I don't think there's a situation where they'll be like, GitOps is what you should do, officially stamp recommendation CNCF. You know, they're not going to do that, but hey, here's some cool, here are the principles that the GitOps working group has come out with. You know, like they'll do promotion and marketing for us. And actually, one more thing on that, in the events committee, we're working on more GitOps events, and for GitOps Day Zero at KubeCon EU, that was just a regular Day Zero sponsored event by Weaveworks and Red Hat. But for KubeCon US, that's going to be a co-located CNCF hosted project conference, which means that multiple sponsors can come in and be part of it and enjoy it. But it also means that there's going to be a lot more marketing for it. It has more of a CNCF stamp of approval. So that marketing arm is, I think, in a really good shape. And I've shared this with the rest of the committee here, but for those elsewhere that don't know, we're planning to do like a GitOps Con standalone conference next year. So this is going to set us up to do that. And it's all going to happen under the guise of the CNCF. I like GitOps TV. That's a great idea.
Nice. That was pretty much very similar to what I was going to say, except I like the focus on the GitOps con thing. One thing I'm not totally sure of, we can check into, and this should probably be added as an action item if someone on the call doesn't know for sure right now, is whether the CNCF project blogs are also a service that's made to sandbox projects, or if that's only incubation projects. If no one knows immediately, I can take the action item to look into it, because I know we've been publishing for other incubation projects and higher. We've been publishing.
No, I think they would let us. Usually I think the limitation on Sandbox is just having enough people to actually do it.
Yeah.
I actually just, so totally unrelated to what y'all are working on, I just went through the webinar thing via the CNCF. So I actually have that information in my email, so I can search it and send it to you.
Thank you. That's awesome. And did you see the note that Jason just, I don't know if everyone saw the note that Jason just posted about GitOps, or excuse me, sorry, Cloud Native TV, that they're supposed to have multiple shows a day. Did you want to say anything about that, Jason?
I would, but Leonardo just mentioned that he probably knows way more about it.
Yeah, well, I'm actually in that working group. We're launching next week. There's going to be one show every day. I'm running one of those shows, but it's focused on Latin America Cloud Native. So it's gonna be in Spanish. So it's gonna be El Día de GitOps. That doesn't really work well. But yeah, so it's launching next week. It's gonna be bi-weekly shows. We've got about, I think it's 10 shows altogether. I think 11 or something. So yeah, that's Cloud Native TV.
That's cool.
Hey, Leonardo, I'd like to, yo también hablo español.
Okay.
Así que, I will be happy to collaborate there.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me, are you on the, I'm guessing you're in the CNCF Slack, right? I can find you there?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I'll reach out. I'm gonna send you a message right now.
Okay, cool. So that was great. That was great. Dan, did you want to get to your you made a topic for simplicity. Do you want to raise that before we get to the glossary agenda item?
Sure. So something I've been thinking a lot about with this initial version of the GitOps principles and looking through them, and I'm sorry that I wasn't more involved in the week-to-week meetings. I missed a couple of the meetings and did some contributions early on, but looking through them, I felt like the wording of things revealed the hands of a committee. So it felt like maybe they were worded in such a way that was very precise, but maybe not as compelling as I think we could make them. So I'm interested in thinking about how we can take these principles and keep wording that is precise as it is now, but trying to make it simpler and maybe more catchy. Because a big part of this, of course, is like not just having principles that are accurate, but also having principles that are catchy. And so I'm interested in taking some time to like rework some of the wording to make these things more human readable, more straightforward, more clear, things that are more easily repeatable and more memorable by themselves. And I felt like even the structure of having each item being the principle of X, that feels like a transitionary state where it's like, we have a principle that's about this. How should we word that? Okay, here's how we're going to word that in this. And it's a little too long and it's a little, maybe overly specific, but it would be nice if like, you want to read it almost like scripture, where it's like, this is the verse, this is the commandment, and it's clear and it draws a very bright line in the sand, and you see it, and maybe you want to get deeper into it. You want to learn more about what that really means, but there's something that's bright and strong enough there to get your interest to even go into the glossary and stuff. And I don't want to shove everything that should be in the glossary into the principle itself. So I don't know if people feel the same way. If you feel like that's not a problem, maybe I'm the only one that thinks this, but I just feel like if we could, as we move forward in the next version, be thinking about how to make these more mimetic, for lack of a better word, like something that makes it so that it catches in the brain more, making them clearer and making them stand by themselves without any introduction and simplicity. And that's really hard to do in a committee, especially. But curious if anybody agrees with that idea, or if you feel like it's, hey, this represents all the wisdom of the crowd here. And
so then would it be the case that it's principle versus the practices?
No, I think it's something that should be on the principle itself. Like looking at the first one, the principle of declarative desired state. Okay, so this is what this principle is going to be about. We haven't taken a position on it, but then we're going to take a position on it in the phrase, a system managed by GitOps must have its desired state expressed declaratively as data in a format writable and readable by both humans and machines. And I think like I don't think we necessarily have to have a principle of desired state if we make it simple enough in its own phrasing. So like if it were like, and I don't know that we need to introduce it by saying like a system managed by GitOps. These are the GitOps principles, right? So that's like kind of built in. So state should be expressed declaratively and readable by humans and machines. You know what I mean? Like make it just super simple, super straightforward. Yeah, we might leave some stuff on the table, but it gets the idea really clearly across. And it's like, what do you know? You know that the state should be declarative. You know that it should be readable by humans and machines. Do we have to say that it's also writable? Maybe, maybe that the other stuff needs to be in there, but I just think like if you can boil it down to a single phrase, a short phrase especially, that's something that is going to be more memorable. And I always think about the Google SRE handbook. I don't know if any of you have read that. It's like really, really good. It's really well written. I don't know who wrote it. But I actually took out and put on my desktop the phrase, hope is not a strategy. Because it's damn mimetic, right? It's memorable as hell. And it's really insightful. And it's like something to live your life by, right? Like it's like really good. And I want the principles to get there. Like I want it to be that strong, that like something that someone would take and stick on a poster. And like if you're not willing to put it on a poster, then maybe it's not simple enough. And I always go back to Feynman, Richard Feynman. If you guys like Richard Feynman, he used to say that if you can't express it simply, you don't understand it well enough yet. So I feel like we haven't quite got there yet. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, that's totally cool. Thanks, Dan. I would just, that's something that we've talked about in past principles meetings, right? Is that we want the principles to be something that can be potentially printed out, not just in a repo, but printed out on a poster, including anything required for it. So if the glossary is required for that, then that should fit on it too, et cetera. But I just had a suggestion. I do think we can discuss it here. It might be nice to add this as a discussion in the GitOps working group GitHub discussion, because I feel like we can get a broader set of thoughts about it. And it might be good to, sketch up something like what that might look like. The one thing I want to I have like a feeling of like almost like butterflies in my stomach from like the months of going over this text with such a broad range of people from different organizations, like moving back and forth between arguably bike shedding specific words or even just, philosophically, debating like the merits of specific phrasing. So I would probably, if I were you, just as a quick suggestion, is couch it as kind of a change in formatting primarily. But that's just.
Yeah, because it's not about the principles really being differently. Like the ideas expressed here are really good, and like the core idea is really good. It's just thinking like, how can we format this and phrase it in such a way that it becomes memorable and clear and doesn't require a lot of parsing. And you might need to leave, you know, some piece, some point on the floor, but maybe you get deeper into it in the glossary. You know, maybe does it have to be in the headline? You know, I don't know. But okay, it's a good idea. I'll put it in discussions. I'll do a write up on that this week. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Do people feel strongly about it? Do you agree, or do you think that maybe I'm overthinking it here?
Leonardo has a hand raised. I don't know if that's for a different topic for this one. Oops,
You're on
I
mute.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, it's about the same thing. So I just basically gonna echo what you both said. I do become very nervous at the thought of going back to the drawing board. You know what I'm saying? Like going back to a point where there is a lot of argument back and forth. But I do think that Dan is not questioning the content, rather the form. And I think that's, you know, it's almost, to me, the way that I understand it, Dan, I might be wrong. Let me know if I am, but it's almost a matter of condensing into a memorable one-liner, right? Not that it should communicate something different or that the content is wrong, just there's redundancy, and maybe we don't even need the principle of something. You just state the principle, period, you know? But I do worry about kind of like the response of the community being one in which we go back to the point where there's a lot of argument. It's kind of like the only thing that I'm not saying it's not, I agree. I think condensing into a shorter form that is easy to memorize, that it's catchy and whatnot, definitely supports the purpose of the principles. But I would tread lightly on making sure that we, through that process, we don't confuse the principle so that people argue that it no longer communicates what has been agreed it communicates after all these weeks, you know?
Yeah.
Months.
Yeah. I want, ultimately, people aren't going to adopt GitOps because it's the official statement of the GitOps working group under the CNCF, this august standard. They're going to use it because it's catchy and it works for them, right? So I think it's important enough to bring up. Robert?
I was just going to say more or less the same thing, that well, if you presented to me the principles rewritten in such a way that made sense and still kept true to the principle, and they're more catchy and you know, more minimal, that would be great. And I would probably then maybe agree that that's a better way to do it. But just looking back at all the discussions, we had certain principles, some principles, you know, were talked over for like 3 meetings in a row, and then we had to take a break and then come back to it. So, you know, saying that, okay, well, now rewrite that. It's really hard for me to, you know, go all in on, but I agree in principle, so to say.
I know we had about 6 hours about the word continuous and what the hell it even meant.
I still disagree with everything, but yeah.
Okay, in the spirit of staying on topic, I think we have a goal, and I'm probably gonna now move to going back to our 2-minute hand raise thing. That was good though. Now we have an action item. Does someone want to add that? Oh, I think you did add that, right? Maybe not. Anyway, if someone want to add an action item for Dan to put that in a discussion. Okay. Just gonna bump this agenda item up slightly. And sorry, folks, don't know what happened just then in the docs. There we go. Okay, cool. I asked asked Jason to come. The next agenda item is I asked Jason to attend this meeting because Jason is working, has worked and is working on the CNCF glossary. And we have a glossary that is a part of the GitOps working group, sorry, a part of the Open GitOps principles by the GitOps working group. That's a CNCF project. So it seems like that would be nice to coordinate somehow there, and maybe we could learn some things from that. So do you want to just introduce yourself? Can take it away for a second, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, folks. Nice to meet all of you. So like Scott said, I've been working for, I guess, a while on this CNCF glossary. So there's a longer story. Essentially, there's a committee that's focused around communicating the business value of CNCF projects to stakeholders. And really early on, we figured out that like it's, as y'all have already learned, it's really hard to like do anything if y'all don't agree on like a common lexicon, or essentially how you use the words that you use, like continuous, right? Or any other one, right? Well, so we built this glossary. The CNCF really liked it, and they published it. They published like an official version 1 of the glossary and shared it out at KubeCon. Yeah, thanks, thanks, Scott. So we've got a repo. We've got folks adding stuff to it. When we got some publicity at KubeCon, we heard from a lot of folks that this is not the only glossary attempt in town. And so basically what I'm trying to do is talk to other folks that are doing them, see what practices we can share, and see where we can like make sure that this CNCF glossary works for you in your use case. And when you're trying to promote like your own stuff, like the products that the GitOps working group are doing, make sure that the CNCF glossary is like linking back to stuff in an appropriate way. So are y'all cool if I just do like a super short tour of the repo? All right. Awesome.
I just want to be sensitive to, even though I invited you here, I just want to be sensitive to a time and agenda. So there are no other agenda items on here right now, but can people please put them on if something comes to mind, and we'll keep track of that. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Hold on, I gotta grab something. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah, awesome. Let me make it a little bigger. Yeah, so this is the state where it's at today, right? So we just got done at KubeCon with our version 1. So between now and the next KubeCon, we're trying to launch 25 new terms. So let's just go through what we have. So the README, it was really just there introducing you to the project, right? Like not going to be a big surprise to anybody. We've got a style guide, which we found pretty useful, and like things that things I'd recommend if y'all are looking at doing your own glossary. This is pretty nice, like to just have like a very clear style guide right at the beginning. The other one, even like the definition layout's been pretty handy. So we've been doing it all in Markdown. We haven't settled on like a really like consumable format yet, right? Like we stuck to really like we were very aggressive about our MVP being pretty bad. And so right now it's a big PDF that's handmade, right? That's the current release. We're hoping that in time for KubeCon, there'll actually be a website, but the artifacts that make up the definition are just like this. They all go in a Markdown file. You put in like a little metadata section, YAML at the top, and then your definition. We've got two basic formats, right? Like when we're dealing with something that is, that like where it makes sense, we do this kind of set of like what it is, problem it addresses, how it helps. And then when we're dealing with something that's more like just the straight concept, we just try and we get out of that syntax and give you a more open-ended way to describe things. But it's been handy, and I guess what I'd hope y'all get out of this is if you're going to do more glossary stuff, one, maybe give us some feedback about bits of metadata that would be helpful to you as far as like allowing you to link to us or us to link over to you. You know, and the other thing I'd hope is that if you're gonna go down this path, like steal some of the stuff that we've made, because some of it has been pretty handy, including a guide for people who are really new to Git on how to actually do like a PR that then links to those GitHub guides. Because like y'all have seen, right, as you were editing your principles, it can get to be really unpleasant to do, you know, normal language editing, right, and that kind of argument in Git. So, you know, here you can look at just the terms that we've got so far, right? Same particular one, I think API gateway is done. The other thing that we did that I thought was really good is we set different statuses, right? So as people go to like add in something, like add in a new term, right? Like, you know, it's hard to decide like what really fits into like the CNCF or like a cloud native term, right? So we have a couple statuses that you can be in, right? Like not started, feedback appreciated, or completed, right? And so it lets us take in new terms as feedback appreciated really easily without actually having to like say, yes, you know, like someone just sent up like, I think it was like zero trust architecture or something was the term, right? And like, it's not on, like no one was thinking about it. And, you know, we got them to change their status to feedback appreciated, and then everyone was comfortable just letting it in. So I guess just some tips for making it easy to get content in from folks. The other thing is, if you do like some of this stuff and you want to borrow it and you think, hey, this could be changed in this way or that way, and you send it back to us, like we're pretty open to changing the way that we work. So we'd love to like take any good ideas y'all have or improvements on this format y'all have. And that's about it for the glossary. The other thing is, you know, again, if we can publicize the work you're doing through this glossary, or at least link to stuff, right, then we'd love to be doing that. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was just queuing myself up for a question. I can wait till you're finished.
No, that was about it. Like,
okay.
I don't really have a long speech. It's a glossary, right? Like it's dull, but it's valuable.
Awesome, thank you. That's rad. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, my mind mulled over this a bit, about how this could be beneficial or maybe too much, depending for the needs for the glossary for the principles, or for the GitOps glossary. I'd love to have other people think about this, but I just have a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. One is, is the CNCF principles project, excuse me, not principles, sorry, is the CNCF glossary project intended to be versioned, for one thing, you know, like in the sense where you could say, you know, yeah, I guess that's the first question. I might as well stop there and wait for the next one.
It is right now, right? So it is right now, because right now, like the release is literally asking a designer to go in and create a PDF, right? Once we've moved past the next KubeCon, what we're hoping to do is just have a live site that's really easy to link to, where you can go grab the appropriate terms and just move through it. And then no, it won't be versioned. It will just be whatever's in, like whatever counts as completed will just be updated live on the site. And then you'll be able to just download a PDF whenever you go in. That's the vision.
I see. So it's not versioned like in a Git tags sense, because the end product is compiled from this metadata with just the terms that are completed. If that, okay, I get it.
Yeah, and we're actually like, so we're pre-planning all the terms that we're actually going to put. So we went through and selected the first 25 terms. We're going through and selecting the next 25 terms. You can see if you go to our project board, where is it? Projects, right? Yeah, there we go. So this is like our V2. So we've got our general intake, and then, as we figure out our next 25 terms that need to go in, they'll all be here in this for next release. But yeah, we're not making use of GitHub tags. We're actually trying to keep it really as absolutely simple as possible from a Git perspective. Not going to do a ton. The other thing is, if you don't feel like building out your own glossary, right? If y'all just want to contribute terms here, like, that's totally fine. Like, we could make like a GitOps category or something. So we're, we don't have anyone that is really strongly opinionated or passionate about the glossary. We just are pretty sure that it's really useful, so we keep doing it.
Yeah, that was going to be my second question, is at at what level of granularity for things that each project might need would make sense for, a combined glossary for CNCF. So for example, if the word continuous has a special meaning for GitOps, might it not also have a different meaning for other projects within the CNCF landscape, and would that be better to have kind of like you said, whether they're categories or whether we just kind of use similar tooling that you have possibly, for our glossary, to compile our glossary. And then just, in the CNCF glossary, you have, some of the high level, some of the high level things that make sense for everyone, like, for example, GitOps, or things like that. I guess could that be an open discussion between us in this project?
Yes, absolutely, right. We could always make a subfolder that's for GitOps stuff, and then like that branches off somewhere. And then like I said, the CNCF is paying like an actual designer to come in and build a site, right? So a lot of that can also be reused. Like, should y'all be doing like a GitOps specific one, or make a GitOps page in the same glossary? We ran into like I don't know, but so we were talking to the CNF, right, which is like a telco specific working group. They've got their own glossary. They were happy to like share some things with us, but they wanted to keep most things inside their own glossary because they wanted to be, very technical and also very telco specific in their words, right? And like the only guiding principle for this one is, it should be accessible to you if you're not already deeply indoctrinated in the space, right? So then you should be able to pick it up, read it, not already know a ton about, GitOps, and get a sense from reading the definition of what's going on, right?
Awesome, thanks, Jason. That's amazing. I'm guessing that we probably have to think more about it as a group. I think Dan just dropped. I was just going to ask him. Maybe he had a technical issue or something, but I was just going to ask. We can follow up with Dan because Dan's leading the website project right now for Open GitOps. So we'll see, I guess, how those might be able to coordinate. That's really cool. I did just want to mention one other thing, and I don't want to steamroll over anyone. So please, let's do the raise hand thing. So like, oh, I guess I didn't do it. I'm going to hold on to my thought and let Leonardo go next because I was just
oh, am I muted? No, just a very quick question, Jason. I translate, I localize mostly Kubernetes documentation into Spanish, and we've had a lot of kind of like issues around terminology and how it translates right to specific like different languages. Just out of curiosity, where do you see localization and multiple languages going kind of forward? I'm guessing there's not a version 2 or version who knows what, right? In terms of internationalization and localization.
Do you mind? Sorry, do you mind like asking that in a different way? I don't totally understand. Like, as far as our goals, like, we'd love to have it in more language. Are you asking if we have something on our
I'm just wondering, like, have you considered, like, I don't know anything about the project, right? So I'm just curious, what do you see going forward? I guess personally, or if you've spoken about it within the project, of the glossary being not just in English. Do you see that as kind of like eventually adding metadata and directories and structure within this project to add other languages? Do you see as kind of like a glossary-es as a separate project where Spanish equivalents of everything? Like, just curious of what how you see that going forward.
Yeah, so we don't have any like plans or thought about it, right?
Okay.
So that would be like, it's definitely, aside from like we'd like it to be there, I don't actually know what's actually a best practice in terms of doing like multiple language support. So, and when like, I guess when we get someone involved that wants to produce content in another language, then we'll start thinking about that.
Because I think like as just a piece of advice, with translation and localization, the more volume we have, the more difficult it becomes.
Yeah.
So it's like if this is something that people are out there are already interested in maybe participating, it's a whole lot easier to translate 25 terms at a time than when you have 10,000, right? So
Yeah.
if you're interested in something like that, do let me know. At least in the context of Spanish translation, I'm involved with the Spanish localization working group or whatever, the ZIC or whatever, SIG I think is what it is. So I could maybe help out some way.
Yeah, hugely interested and would really love advice on like the right way to structure the project. So if you don't mind, I might ping you offline, because I would love to get some just general advice on it. And then yes, we would 100%
awesome
get definitions transferred over.
Cool.
Yeah. Robert, did you want to say that out loud? Are you able to speak, or did you just?
No, I was just, well, while people were talking, in regards to the fact that right now it's a PDF, right, that's produced and everything like that. So it's kind of hard to have that in a lot of different languages. When the website is up, you could probably just have an easy way of doing that, having multiple versions of the same, which then will be generated based on what language you select on the web page. And as I said, Norwegian/Scandinavian, whatever that means. So Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian, I guess. And very badly German. And 3 words of Spanish. There you go. And some Japanese, actually. So, you know. Not to brag.
That is awesome. Very relevant, humble brag. I love it. Yeah, I can't help with any of that, unfortunately, but I love that this is happening. I was just going to ask you, Jason, do you just to mention what I think our current need is? We were talking earlier about like being able to print something on a poster, right, or being able to have everything co-located. And so for the GitOps principles, we actually put those, rather than in a separate repo called principles or something like that, we put them in a repository called documents, because the idea is that some of these will depend on one another. And so in the case of the GitOps definition and principles, we do want them to be versioned, in part because it's a kind of dog fooding, because we're talking about, ultimately versioning things as a way to direct operations. In this case, it's not really, there's nothing machine readable for these definitions are really just human readable, but they are principles on which other systems will be built. So we want to be able to version them. And we want the glossary items to be able to be versionable along with them, so that when there's when there's an update to one of the principles and that an important note gets moved to a definition, like with what happened in past meetings, we can do that. I guess what I'm wondering is, maybe it's something we can think about for the kind of asynchronously, but I'm wondering if it might make sense to use a system like what you're open sourcing for the CNCF glossary, but then have that somehow compiled into a format. Excuse me, I want to say, I didn't mean compiled, I mean, ultimately rendered into some kind of format that we could write back to our repo and then version, So just something that I might want to think with you about, if that seems, or we might want to think about if that seems like a relevant way to go.
Yeah. So as far as that, like it's handy for, like, if it's handy for the glossary project that changed, like, for example, we, the GitOps working group would love to see the glossary do, when you do a release, cut like an actual release, and this is the glossary at this moment in time, right? Like if that's a feature that is important and adds value to you, then like we're totally open to adding it, right? But it's really just right now the goal is, get people to read the terms and hopefully update them, and then as other use cases appear, meet those needs. But so far our use cases are super limited, right? Like it's really just stop arguing about what blue, green, and canary means. Like that really was the heart of it. So everything past there is gravy.
Nice. Cool. So we have 12 more minutes left. I think I'm someone mentioned principals committee burn, what is it, PTSD from arguing about terminology. Yeah, actually, if there's nothing else with the glossary, I think that item is done. And yeah, Jason, you were asking just to speak this out loud about like what the hand raising thing is about. It's because like sometimes the meeting can be this number of people, sometimes the meeting can be twice or more than this number of people, and there are some pretty it's just a way to like help run the meetings fairly so everybody gets a chance to speak. Yeah, it was just like a moderation technique, that's all. But I think what I'm wondering is what should we do with the rest of, oh, hey, Jason.
I love it. It's a great setup. I'm going to copy it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a cool Slack, or it's a cool Zoom feature. So anyway, what do we want to do with the rest of the 11 minutes that we have left? Do we want to just kind of take that back, or do we want to, as the principals committee, look at some of the content that was in the glossary and other supporting documents before we added the pared down pre-release that we just did? Do you think, any opinions? So I'm going to throw out an opinion in the absence of another one. I'm going to say that we should get our time back because 11 minutes might be too short a time to really focus on one of them. We could possibly, but only if we were like really in the zone. And I feel like we're now kind of we've stepped up a bit on conceptual land of how the project might work, with glossary items and with, like with what Dan said about potential simplification as a discussion. And maybe what we can do for the next meeting is just have set an agenda ahead of time, which I did not do, by the way, of like specific items from that, a lot of the content that we had before that last simplification, and just kind of maybe individuals who are interested can look at the pieces of those and see if you want to bring up specific points. You know what I mean? What do you all think about that as like a way forward for next time, or do you have any other ideas of how to make it better?
I think that works, and yeah, I think that works. And I'd like to. I think right now what is really most important to me, and actually something that I think we want to talk about in some other meeting, not this one because it's not principles related. It's more kind of like a GitOps content. I don't want to say committee because I don't want to have like the 20 committees, but kind of like just GitOps content initiatives that can be driven by the working group that, together with the principals, kind of like help us like bring this high level concepts to the ground and kind of like talk to people as to what they actually mean, right? Like what how does it look like in practice, and why is it different from just good old continuous deployment? And kind of like share what our common understanding is at a more ground level.
Cool. I think it's Robert, then Christian.
Yeah, I was just going to say that having initiatives regards to content and stuff, going back to what I said at was last meeting, that I'm going to do a GitOps principle or GitOps in a general presentation internally at my company. And I'm still not done with the presentation. So if we had a presentation I could use, like having that kind of material laying around for people to use would be great. But as well, doing stuff like blogs about certain terms, and maybe webinars that can get submitted to different things that happen. There's a lot of things happening. Just general content that promotes GitOps would be a good idea for someone to work with, at least.
Okay, Christian.
Yeah, I think last meeting I mentioned like having a like a press kit almost, right, or like some sort of kit. I think that'd be useful to have once around the principles specifically. Also in regards to like blogs and things. I think last the committee before this one, I did take the action item away of being able to promote some of these blogs, not necessarily from the working group, not only from the working group, but just in general out there, just to get more exposure. We can also use that avenue to have the principles be promoted out there, to kind of get more exposure, and then ultimately get more feedback from the people out there. So,
Christian, what's the word that you use? Press what? Press. I'm making a note here, and I want to use.
Oh, like a press kit, right?
Kit,
so like
that's
here,
the word.
yeah, like here are the logos, here are the snippets, right, sort of thing.
Here are the principal illustrations that one can use, or things like that.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Cool. Go ahead, Scott.
At a certain point, we had hoped that the principals committee would be somewhat short-lived. It went on a bit longer than we thought. And it's still necessary to bring in the other content that we had before. But I think I'm just kind of thinking about what, let's see, what Leonardo, what you were just saying, and including what Kristen just mentioned. You know how we have a GitOps Con committee, and then we just renamed the GitOps Con committee to the events committee to broaden it a bit because there are other GitOps related events. Would it be worth broadening the principals committee to be the documents committee, since we said that the stated purpose of, well, sorry, finish this last 30 seconds I have before, since we know that our goal now is to move a lot of that content from what was originally coupled with the principles to be supporting documents that are inside of the same version documents repo. Is that something that we now want to do and think about broadening this group?
So I'm doing a physical hand raising here, just because I think that's a good idea. I would not necessarily call it documents, because I don't, like, off the top of my head, it doesn't resonate with kind of like the objectives that we want to accomplish. But
Okay.
I think we, having defined the principles, there is ongoing work that we should do in terms of producing materials in general that galvanize, that solidify what those principles are, and that bring in more specific use cases that demonstrate how they apply to different scenarios, right? So I'm thinking everything from architecture diagrams and use cases and all these types of things, right? That can work together with the principles, that can demonstrate what the principles are about, and also evolve them in terms of not the principles themselves, but kind of like everything around them. We talked about glossary, we talked about notes, like all these things are going to change over time. So yeah, I like the idea of extending. I'd like to, I guess what I'm trying to say is I like the idea of extending the purpose. I'd like to clearly define what that purpose is going forward, right? To make sure that we have clear objectives as to what this renamed committee would would be in charge of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for responding to that. I wanted to note, Jason. Yeah, business value subcommittee. Yeah, that also doesn't sound very sexy or exciting, but important, but still important. So yeah, so we've defined right now, currently the Open GitOps project is defined as CNCF sandbox project for lasting programs, documents, and code from the GitOps working group. And the idea of that was that working groups aren't meant to be forever. Or not even forever, but working groups aren't meant to be lasting. Working groups are meant to be temporary to achieve a purpose. And that's the same is true with the GitOps working group. That's why the Open GitOps project was started, for all of the lasting artifacts and things that will continue to be useful to people. So the reason so far that we just named the repo documents is because it just was one of the three things that we said this is for. That's really it. We can always change that, and we can always make the name of a group different. I was just thinking that maybe principles at this point might be a little bit narrow for what for now where we're going with this, which is to spread some of that love to, we also have a lot more content than I think people coming into this now will see. It just looks like a quick one pager, whereas the PR before the last simplification was lots and lots of information about best practices and so on, and other, the real meaning of the value of why we're even doing this.
I guess a question that I would ask is then, what do we really need a committee? Like, isn't this like, aren't we all just generally talking about the purpose of the working group? So we basically just, as a working group, work together in different objectives. Our first objective was the principles. Now that we've done that, we just keep like, maybe we should just have a working group meeting of a regular cadence and have specific objectives that we just nail over time.
We do. So we have a month. Right. You're right.
I like what I'm saying is maybe we don't necessarily need further segmentation for specific objectives that all fall within the multitude of objectives that the working group is supposed to achieve, right?
Christian?
Yeah, so I'm on the so I agree with Leo in principle, but we need to discuss on how that looks like, because we do have the monthly meeting, and then like, or are we talking about in lieu of the monthly meeting? But if not, then what is the monthly meeting just kind of, would that turn generically into a, like, hey, this is what we're all doing, kind of like a public forum sort of thing? And then also, there is the danger of having just like infinite subcommittees, right, of doing every little thing versus, but then there is the other danger of like having too much to do in one committee, sort of thing, right? And so I guess my primary concern is that how do we scope the work of this specific group so that way people wanting to join, knows what group to join. I guess that's one, right? Which committee to join, and then two, so that way it doesn't necessarily, like, I don't want to say get away from us, but like if there's stuff that is, there's going to be natural overlap, but if there's stuff like, like the events committee, like GitOps Con, like we wouldn't talk about that here necessarily, even though it's related. So I do want to, I guess we don't get our time back, but I guess maybe this is a topic for next week's discussion of like, if we are going to like redefine it, let's take that time next week to actually like redefine it.
Makes sense. So as noted, we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to, if folks on here, do you want to stay an extra couple of minutes just to kind of round this one out? That's okay. I don't want to like say, oh, don't say anything. But don't feel obligated to, and don't feel like you're going to miss it because we are recording these last moments. So Robert, do you want to say your bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that perhaps it's even possible to have certain topics that needs to be discussed more than the the monthly one-off GitOps meeting, and then one could, instead of having a committee for everything that's going to pop up, just have like an ad hoc conversational Slack, find that people want to discuss this, gather your crew there and kind of just go like, all right, we'll do once a week and then present it at for 3 weeks and then present it at the next GitOps monthly and see what people think. People can do that. It doesn't need to be like a fully organized committee per se, I would think, at least.
Okay, is your hand still raised, Christian, from before, or did you want to say something else?
Christian is driving, so.
Oh, he might have been. Yeah.
Sorry. No, I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay, all good. Yeah, so in that case, I think just as like to summarize that last point quickly, just so no one's confused, we have not decided to change anything. We have not decided to change anything. I'm almost sorry I mentioned it now, honestly, because it took us a while to get a cadence where people come together regularly. So, but that's interesting. We should probably discuss it. And I will say that this is probably an area where we want to filter up to the, like this kind of a thing to the, to either the monthly group or the chairs meeting, because it wouldn't be decided for each committee. Like the way we've had it so far is we just have committees. I mean, it's a formal sounding name, but really what it means is a group of people that are working on a specific topic. So, and a lot of the people are on, some people are on multiple committees, not everyone. It's all according to individual interest and ability. So I think we shouldn't change that unless we have something better to replace it with. So that's my suggestion anyway, just so we don't confuse folks. But that's it. And we are now 4 minutes over, not too horrible. Thanks all for waiting. And I will see you, unless there's anything else burning, I'll see you next time. All right. And see you on Slack. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Bye.